Howdy Commanders, Echo here. Have you ever been in a game without any destroyers at all on the roster? Or maybe there aren't any on your flank, maybe because they have either died already or they just didn't spawn over there because it's a small destroyer count game. They're on the opposite side of the map. Or maybe, like you're about to see, you even have destroyers on your flank, but they're not interested in doing their job. And sometimes when you're in one of these situations, you've just got to compensate and pick up the slack and fill the role of a destroyer even if you are in a cruiser. And that's what we're going to take a look at and talk about today. That is the destroyer Belfast. This game that we're looking at in particular is on the map Crash Zone. As you see there, it's the 3 neutral cap configuration. We are at the southwest or alpha spawn. We're divvied up with DB, and he's in the Tier 7 Tech Tree U.S. battleship, the Iowa. Uh-oh, Echo. You're in the Tier 6 Premium British Cruiser, the Belfast, and he's in the Tier 7. I smell fail platoon. Yes, I hear your concerns, and I often tell people not to fail platoon, and you shouldn't do it. I shouldn't be doing it here. However, temper your criticism with the following consideration. I personally think that of all the ships in the game, the Belfast is one of, if not the best ships that can kind of hang in a fail platoon. And really, 6 up to 7 isn't that much of a fail platoon. I mean, a few months ago it literally wasn't a fail platoon because there was nothing above 7. 6s could see 7s anyway. It was basically a way of guaranteeing that whoever was in the 6 was for sure fighting against 7s. Now that we have Legendaries in the game, it is technically a fail platoon, but Legendaries are still pretty rare. They occur far less often than 7s, and at this specific time of this game, Legendaries had just started coming out. The fact that there were 3 of them in this game at all was incredibly rare. It was the first time that DB and I had seen more than one on either team at all yet. They were still really new to the game. So it was a bit of a dice roll to not come up against Legendaries, but, you know, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Getting shot at by a Yamato, an Alaska, or a Grosse Kurfürst in a Belfast is basically no different than getting shot at by a Vladivostok, or an Iowa, or an Amagi, Bismarck, etc. So it doesn't really matter. Anyway, on to the gameplay. This is a quick note from the Odin update. As we mentioned, Legendaries had just started to, make their presence known in the game, which means there are no proxy mechanics on the legendary skills in this game. As I mentioned earlier, we did spawn at the alpha cap, as did one of our DDs who took his sweet time getting around into the cap. The destroyer from Bravo spawn decided to follow in the wake of the DD from Alpha spawn. The Udachi from Bravo is just literally, look at that. They're like a half grid square apart, following, stern to bow behind each other. It just doesn't make any sense. Meanwhile, the enemy got Charlie for absolutely free. And one of the destroyers is also in Bravo about to get it. Now, we used our smoke screen there to make sure we stayed concealed in Alpha as we were getting the cap assist on it. And if you noticed, we pointed our bow sort of between the 2 islands on the northeast part of Alpha so that we could either go straight ahead and duck in behind that bigger island that's partially in the cap, or we could turn out and away heading kind of east-southeast if we had to. Now this play here, I'm anticipating that there's going to be a destroyer in Bravo. Now here I am. I've already filled the role of a destroyer once by getting into a cap and flipping it while sitting in my smoke screen. I'm getting barked at to get back. Yeah, I probably should get back a little bit, or at least angle a little better to those battleships out west, but we need to chase down these guys. We flip on the radar anticipating at least one DD, but oh, look at that, there's 2 of them. And if you look really closely, especially when I zoom in, you can actually see the water around this Udachi turn kind of a brownish, yellowish color. And that's because all the guys in his deck crew are pissing and shitting themselves because, oh my god, there's a Belfast charging me down and I'm spotted by his radar. My radar expires, we keep lighting him up. There's a Baltimore who's now been emboldened by my bold play to push in and finally give me some support. Here comes the other Yudachi. They're both within about a half grid square of each other, practicing some great map distribution and positioning, just like our DDs. Kudos to them. We are getting shot at, but it's, proving relatively ineffective. We did take one Citadel there at one point. We could have gotten deleted. It's entirely possible. But this is kind of the risk we had to do. We were already behind on caps, and the rest of our team was not in any sort of position to compensate for that or make up for it. Yudachi there gets a little bold. We anticipate him potentially doing that to send torps, so we pull forward a little bit more to put the island between us and where he was likely to have shot those from, using the island as a piece of cover from any potential torps. So here we are again. We're contesting a cap, locking down this other Yudachi. He doesn't want to come around because he knows, we'd be able to blap him and probably be able to take off and avoid any of his torps. We've got him lit by the sonar. Our sonar expires, but he stays lit as soon as the Baltimore kicks on his sonar. Pretty great there. Nice job there, Baltimore. Could be the Baltimore proxy spotting him, I guess. Hard to say which. It would be nice, Wargaming, if we had some kind of indicator of when friendlies were using various consumables, smoke screens, radars, etc. So we knew what was being used and what wasn't. Overlap them, timeout, using our consumables so we didn't overlap them unnecessarily, etc. But either way, Yudachi spotted. Now, again, if you take a big whiff, try really, really hard, you might be able to even smell the fear coming off of this guy as he's locked down by both a Baltimore and a Belfast. Now, we know Baltimore's in the cap and looks like he's going to stay there. Nice job on him, by the way, anticipating those torps, seeing them come in and dodging them while in reverse. That was a good job on his part. We know he's got the cap contested, so they're not getting points off of it. We're going to loop around here. We were at basically a stalemate, and we weren't getting anywhere. We couldn't pull out to fight him because he'd torp us, and we'd be getting blapped by all the enemies up there. So I go flank around. Yudachi can't go south into the Bravo cap any further towards Alpha direction because he's locked down by Baltimore. So I swing around up here to lock off a northerly retreat, and we're going to gun him down and take basically nothing in return. Now, I don't know if the rest of the enemy team had some kind of early access to the proxy mechanics, because as I mentioned, this was during the Odin update. So as far as I knew, they weren't in the game yet. But if you notice, they've really got like a grid and a half or so of the kind of northwest sector of the map really locked down. I don't know, maybe, like I said, they had access to those proxy mechanics, but they're really demonstrating the efficacy of the black hole strategy. We get first blood there at 7 minutes and 45 seconds remaining on the clock, functionally halfway through the game. That's pretty rare. When you consider a lot of games these days are in total garbage time and are basically a formality of wrapping them up at 7:45 left on the clock, to have no one die until that time is pretty remarkable and noteworthy. So now we're yet again going to fill the role of a destroyer for like the third or fourth time in this game, depending on what exactly you're counting. We're going to pull up into the Charlie cap here. We're going to pop our smoke screen. Wait till that little icon indicator to the right of your minimap shows the little arrow surrounded in the little smoke cloud and the timer below it. That's telling you that you are actually in and concealed by the smoke screen. If you pull out of it, which we're going to see in a little bit, I am going to pull out of the smoke screen while it's still active. That little arrow indicator or icon will change to the canister shape. That is the same shape indicator or icon as the consumable itself down with your D-pad buttons in the bottom of your screen. So, if there's ever a question when you're zoomed down the sights, especially like, am I technically in the smoke screen or not? That's one way to tell that the game is telling you, like, yes, we, the game mechanics, consider you to be in the bloom of the smoke screen or not. You can also know that by where your center dotted line comes out of, the middle of the ship there at the very bottom center of the map. The base of that dotted line that is directly in your midships, if that is inside the line of the smoke screen, you will be considered to be in the smoke. Also, if you're being blocked by the smoke, also applies to islands, etc. Just something to keep in mind when you're playing any ship with a smoke screen. It's particularly important in the Belfast, it being somewhat squishy and all. Now, if you see here, I'm anticipating this Yamato just continuing to push in, and though I had about 28 seconds or so, I need to bail out of there, because if I just sit there and wait for my smoke screen to, time out and disappear, he's going to be within my detection range by the time it disappears, and if I wait until that smoke screen disappears to get out of there, he's going to have a shot on me, and one Citadel and a regular pen from a Yamato, and I'm dead at this health. So we kind of back around, we do like a 3-point turn, kind of anticipating this, and then we rip out of there while the smoke is still in play, giving us plenty of cover just in case he managed to sneak inside of our blue ring. And this is one of the key components to playing the Belfast in particular. It is relatively squishy, doesn't have a whole lot of armor, it's difficult to angle it, especially against a lot of tier 6, pretty much all tier 7 battleships, and especially legendary tier battleships. You're going to have a really hard time kind of defending yourself with your armor. You don't have a ton of health, and you need to use your smokescreen and your concealment to your advantage and keep the enemies sort of at arm's length. So we've gotten Charlie Cap, we used our smokescreen to be able to get it, we used our smokescreen to cover our exit, and now we're just keeping Bismarck at close to max range and just bombing on him. In addition to being, sort of that cruiser that can fill a destroyer role, the Belfast is also a great kiter. It's got great turning circle, great rudder shift, especially with the slot 2 rudder shift mod. You've got that sort of baked in British cruiser propulsion module. If you notice in slot 2 you can't actually take propulsion, that's because it's kind of baked in. And with Fraser as your captain, his base trait gives you a slight bump in speed. It's basically the equivalent of having a combat booster speed flag on from Fraser's base trait. So those of you out there, I've seen it in a couple comment sections and live chat comment sections and whatnot, that people are having some trouble with Belfast and they find it difficult to play. Use your concealment to get in close. It should be, depending on your level of Macau inspiration, who you should definitely be running on these ships. Depending on your level of Macau inspiration, you should be in that kind of mid to low 9-kilometer range for concealment. So get up close, get into caps, get behind islands, and bomb over them. The shell arcs are not quite American, but they are, as you can see here at this almost max range, decently high arcing. And kite when you can, kite when you have to. Use your smoke screens to be a stationary long-range harassment. And you can fill both of a destroyer role and a sort of kiting, stationary type of cruiser roles as well. So it's really kind of a 3-role ship. And you see there, we did less than 30,000 damage, although a lot of that was on DDs. And yet we took top of the leaderboard. I would chalk that up largely to the fact that we basically did the job of a DD with 1 solo cap, 1 cap assist, and a bunch of DD spotting and damage. You see there over 500,000 silver in the bank, helped out by the first blood award and all of those cap ribbons and green defender ribbons. Quick look at the build here and some final thoughts. Let me know in the comments below if you're enjoying the Belfast, if you've got it. And if you are having any trouble, feel free to ask some questions. I hope this video has given you some insight into how you need to play that ship. Think about your egress routes. Remember your base concealment. Make sure people aren't getting too close so you get trapped in a spot with your smoke screen. And also consider, is this a time where I need to use the Belfast more like a destroyer, less like a cruiser? Thanks an awful lot for listening, everyone. I greatly appreciate it. And as always, stay salty, Commanders.